How do you keep things like a revolution, a smallpox outbreak, the creation of a new nation in the Atlantic Ocean from getting in the way of your passion and desires for the one person you love most in this world when there's no cell phones, Zoom, or Alexa? Why, you write letters, of course. Hundreds and hundreds of letters, each word expressing your longing and adoration, your fears and anxieties, your hopes and dreams. Written conversations so rich in detail, tone, and measure that when you are reunited, you pick up the music of your life together as if you hadn't missed a beat. This is love. This is devotion. This is the power of passion.
You've planted your dreams. It's time to release. No more fear. No more fear. Surrender it all. Trust you won't fall. Time to fly. Time to fly.
Hello, happy 2023, and welcome to the Aquitaine Project, a podcast all about celebrating women of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm Marlo Mead, your host, guide, and fellow traveler, on a journey where together we explore the stories, legacies, and life lessons of women from across the ages. Women I affectionately call my Brightlighters. For me, these women transcend time. Lighting the way forward, they make it possible for each of us to become Brightlighters in our own right. So join me as I share with you stories about some pretty amazing women. Who knows, you might just learn a little, grow a little, laugh a little, and find new ways to shine bigger and brighter than ever.
Free your soul.
It's a brand new year, sisters. A time for looking forward, making plans, setting goals, and realigning our priorities. In other words, focusing on what's really important. For me, this means welcoming the new year with enthusiasm, boundless creative energy, and, dare I say, a deeper passion. Passion for my work and what I choose to accomplish in this world. Passion for the people in my life who bring me so much joy and love, and for this life I'm creating one day at a time. As I look forward to what this year has in store for me, I can't help but look to the past and be inspired by a woman whose passions for her husband and family, the causes she believed in, such as American independence, advancing women's rights and access to education, and abolishing slavery, were just a few of the things that defined who she was as a woman, wife, mother, and as the first Second Lady and second First Lady of the United States of America. In this first episode of 2023, let's get to know this founding Brightlighter and maybe learn a thing or two about living and loving with passion and the importance passion plays to our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. In an era when girls and women were denied a formal education, being a smart, curious, outspoken, and politically savvy young lady was frowned upon, to say the least. But growing up in the 1700s with a father who was a liberal-minded minister and a mother who believed in instructing her daughters to read, write, and cipher, for us living in the 21st century, cipher means math, had its advantages. Thanks to her family's pretty progressive ideas on education, Abigail Smith spent hours in the family library studying French and English literature, along with philosophy. She developed a keen interest in poetry and politics, two subjects she would passionately embrace her entire life. When 24-year-old John Adams met the shy and demure 15-year-old Abigail Smith, He was not particularly interested in her. As a young Harvard-educated country lawyer, he was too busy trying to make a name for himself and build up his law practice. One of John's friends was smitten with Abigail's older sister and dragged him along on his many visits to the Smiths' house. During these visits, John began to change his tune about the book-smart minister's daughter and discovered within Abigail a kindred spirit. By 17, Abigail had grown into a confident young woman. Her keen intellect, witty conversation, and astute observations on the social and political topics of the day matched his own. Well, as fate would have it, they developed a deep, smoldering passion for each other, and in 1762 they began a 2-year courtship. During those 2 years, John was often away practicing law, so they began writing love letters to each other. Indulging in their shared fondness for classical mythology, they used the pen names Lysander, a heroic Spartan admiral, and Diana, the Roman goddess of the moon and hunting. How cute is that? In these letters, courting conversations as I call them, they expressed their abiding affection for each other and their desire to be with each other always. Some of their early letters were, shall I say, almost risque for the time. For instance, on October 4th, 1762, John wrote to Abigail, "By the same token that the bearer hereof sat up with you last night, I hereby order you to give him as many kisses and as many hours of your company after 9 o'clock as he pleases to demand, and charge them to my account." Wow, Mr. Adams, kisses after 9 o'clock? How scandalous. Abigail was also quite versed in the language of love, but tended to be more poetic. In a letter to John in 1763, she openly expressed her bond and deep connection to him. She writes, "And there is a tie more binding than humanity and stronger than friendship that unites these, and there is a threefold cord, and by this cord I am not ashamed to say that I am bound, nor do I believe that you are wholly free from it. The ties that bound them, body, mind, and soul, have become the stuff of historical legend." Throughout their 54 years of marriage, John and Abigail Adams developed and nurtured a relationship that was nothing short of extraordinary for the time. Heck, it's pretty extraordinary for our own time today. Their lives were defined by their passion for each other, the causes they shared, their many mutual interests, and expressed within the more than 1,100 letters they would exchange during their life together. During the first 10 years of their marriage, Abigail gave birth to 6 children, but only 4 would live to adulthood, including John Quincy Adams, who would eventually become the 6th President of the United States. Here's a fun fact. There are only 2 women in U.S. history who were the wife and mother of a U.S. president. Abigail is one. Can you name the other? Because of John's law practice, the Adams family moved several times, eventually settling permanently on John's family farm in Braintree, Massachusetts. In 1774, as the tensions between the 13 colonies and Great Britain grew, John headed to Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. There, along with the likes of George Washington, Samuel Adams, yep, the one on the beer can, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, John Jay, and others, his political career started to take off, and he established himself as an eloquent debater and fearless patriot lawyer. Well, while John and the gang were busy trying to figure out the best course of action and how to deal with King George, Abigail was busy raising and educating their children and managing the family farm and business investments. She did such an amazing job that John pretty much handed all of his business affairs over to her, which was a pretty smart move, considering it was her shrewd business sense that increased their family holdings and allowed them to live in relative comfort in later life. But their separations were at times unbearable. I'm sure many of us can relate to the feelings of loneliness and longing when we are apart from the one we love. Abigail expresses such feelings in a letter she wrote to John when he was away in Philadelphia. She wrote, "I dare not express to you at 300 miles how ardently I long for your return. The idea plays about my heart and awakens all the tender sentiment that years have increased and matured. Wow. Even after 10 years of marriage, they hated to be apart. Unfortunately, fate and circumstances would separate them far too often. As the revolutionary spirit swept through the colonies, neither John nor Abigail were idle in voicing their beliefs. Abigail, who passionately supported the movement for independence, famously argued that independence should be applied to women as well as men. It was during the Second Continental Congress, as John Adams, now a leader of the impending revolution, and his fellow delegates debated the question of formally declaring independence from Great Britain, that Abigail Adams wrote her most famous letter to her husband, dated March 31st, 1776. Let me read this to you in her own words. I long to hear that you have declared an independency, and, by the way, in the new code of laws which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. That your sex are naturally tyrannical is a truth so thoroughly established as to admit no dispute, but such of you as wish to be happy willingly give up the harsh title of master for the more tender and endearing one of friend. Why, then, not put it out of the power of the vicious and the lawless to use us with cruelty and indignity with impunity? Men of sense in all ages abhor those customs which treat us only as the vassals of your sex. Regard us then as beings placed by Providence under your protection, and in imitation of the Supreme Being, make use of that power only for our happiness. Let her words sink in for a minute. Remember the ladies. Men are tyrants. A women's rebellion. Master versus friend. Vassals of your sex. It's 1776, ladies. The colonies are on the verge of revolution, and this woman is speaking in terms any 21st century woman could understand. Pretty remarkable. Well, John replied somewhat jokingly to her letter, expressing fear of the despotism of the petticoat. Okay, let's remember it was the 1700s, and while he was pretty enlightened when it came to many things and adored and entrusted his wife's opinion, his views on expanding women's rights was pretty short-sighted. But Abigail pushed back, making it clear that she was serious about the improved status of women in a future independent republic. In her response to John's dismissive answer to her recommendations on women's rights, Abigail was vexed, and she let John know about it. She admonished him over the hypocrisy of proclaiming peace and goodwill to men and emancipating all nations, while insisting on keeping absolute power over women. The fact that he personally treated her as an equal partner, but would deny the same goodwill toward other women, was indeed hard to reconcile. In a follow-up letter, Abigail says to John, and I quote, "But you must remember that arbitrary power is like most things hard, very liable to be broken, and notwithstanding all your laws and maxims, we have within our power not only to free ourselves, but to subdue our masters, and without violence throw both your natural and legal authority at our feet." End quote. Whoa, ladies. I think we all know exactly what she meant. Good for you, Abigail. Now, keep in mind, when Abigail wrote the March 31st letter, she was raising her young children and managing the family farm alone. Although her days were busy with the duties of a single parent living both in a war zone, the British Army was only 12 miles away in Boston, and in an area ravaged by a smallpox epidemic, she still contemplated the political changes taking place within the colonies and was deeply concerned about the status of women under the new government, especially their limited rights under the marriage laws, and for good reason. You see, In the 1700s, the lives of colonial married women were governed by the legal doctrine of femme couvert, or coverture. Under this doctrine, a husband and wife were considered one person, and that person was the husband. A married woman could not own property, sign legal documents, enter into contracts, obtain an education against her husband's wishes, or keep wages for herself. Since only property owners could vote, coverture effectively denied women that right. Like other dependent persons, women were not assumed to have separate interests of their own that needed to be represented in politics. In other words, the welfare of women was completely in the hands of men, and the law offered them little protection from the tyrants among them. Although her letter was often cited correctly as evidence of her fervent desire for women's rights, she was not a feminist as some historians have depicted her to be, and did not champion then or at any time the right of women to vote. The very idea was virtually unheard of at the time. Abigail's goal was to establish laws that would better protect women's personal and marriage rights and allow them greater access to education. She vigorously supported formal education for women, writing to John in 1778 that you need not be told how much female education is neglected, nor how fashionable it has become to ridicule female learning. While she had been fortunate to grow up in a home where her parents encouraged her education, she knew this was not the case for most of the women of her time. She believed education would help women become better members of society as wives and mothers who would play a vital role in preparing their sons to be virtuous citizens and leaders in the new republic. She also favored the abolition of slavery. Now, it cannot be overlooked that her family were slaveholders and that she grew up with 4 household slaves, something I was not aware of until learning more about her life. But Abigail would come to strongly express anti-slavery beliefs as an adult, and went out of her way to point out the hypocrisy of many of the founders who held slaves. She felt it was morally wrong to fight for freedom when it was being denied daily to those who had as good a right to freedom as the white colonists. She certainly was a no-holds-bar kind of woman. Abigail's private and public life was infused with her passion for some pretty unpopular political and social views for the times, as well as a deep and abiding devotion to her husband and family. Amidst the backdrop of John's increased political stature, a full-blown revolution, and the creation of a new nation, Abigail had become John's best friend, closest confidant, and ally, and he unfailingly regarded her as his loving wife, intellectual equal, and most cherished companion. From their initial courtship in 1762 through their time as President and First Lady over 3 decades later, their love and passion would endure despite the weeks, months, and even years they would be separated from each other. As in the early part of their relationship, their letters became a virtual lifeline, keeping them connected and offering us a glimpse into a truly special love story. John and Abigail Adams wrote over 1,000 letters to each other, and even 20 years after they met in her father's home, they still felt passionately about each other. In 1782, when John was in the Netherlands trying to borrow money for the new American government, Abigail wrote, "My dearest friend, should I draw you the picture of my heart, it would be what I hope you still would love, though it contained nothing new. The early passion you obtained there and the absolute power you have ever maintained over it leaves not the smallest space unoccupied. I look back to the early days of our acquaintance and friendship as to the days of love and innocence, and with an indescribable pleasure I have seen near a score of years roll over our heads, with an affection heightened and improved by time. Nor have the dreary years of absence in the smallest degree effaced from my mind the image of the dear, untitled man to whom I gave my heart." Wow, talk about a love letter. When John Adams became America's second president in 1797, Abigail played an instrumental role in supporting her husband. Upon his election, John eagerly wrote his wife, "I never wanted your advice and assistance more in my life." As First Lady, Abigail maintained and voiced strong opinions about the political issues and debates of the day. She wrote about her struggles to keep herself in check. I have been so used to freedom of sentiment that I know not how to place so many guards about me as will be indispensable to look at every word before I utter it and to impose a silence upon myself when I long to talk. There's that passionate, outspoken streak of hers I admire so much. After John Adams lost to Thomas Jefferson in the 1800 presidential election, Abigail wrote to her son saying she had few regrets about retiring from public life and looked forward to spending time with her children and grandchildren and enjoying life on the farm, and that is exactly what she did. The hundreds upon hundreds of letters John and Abigail shared tell us about their long love affair, deeply passionate and occasionally vexed. They were lovers, friends, partners, trusted advisors, and confidants. In 1818, at the age of 73, Abigail contracted typhoid fever and died on October 28th, just 3 days after their anniversary. John, her distraught husband of 54 years, was heard to say, "I wish I could lay down beside her and die too. Oh, be still, my heart." Luckily for us, their love story is preserved on the pages of their letters and is a testimony to their life and times as America's first power couple. Our passions are what drive us as human beings, what makes things desirable and worthwhile. It's why we fall in love, why we pursue a certain passion or talent, why we take up causes, why we explore the world. I say passions, plural, because I believe we all have more than one passion in our lives. For Abigail, it was her husband and family, engaging in political discourse, education, American independence, and championing the rights of women and slaves. For her, all of these things, these passions, were part of her daily life, part of who she was as a person. So when I talk about living with passion, I mean embracing those things and people that we love, that fire us up and get us excited, the things we could spend hours doing, supporting, making, or talking about. It could be our jobs, the causes we are involved with, our hobby, our activity, or a creative project. For me, as many of you know, the Aquitaine Project is one of my life's passions. I could talk about women's history and how we women have the capacity to empower ourselves for hours. I'm also very passionate about cooking and my family and cooking for my family. It all kind of goes together for me. I still have visions of opening up a little eatery and serving up my favorite home-cooked meals to adoring customers. The very thought of it makes me smile. But until then, I'll keep cooking in my kitchen and loving every minute of it. I also love taking care of people. I think I was born with this particular passion, whether it's at work, in a social gathering, or just with a bunch of friends. Wanting people to be happy is just part of who I am. Now, the big questions are, how do we discover the things we're passionate about? Then, once we figure that out, how do we make our passions part of our lives? First, how do we find what we're passionate about? Well, I wasn't born with a slotted spoon in my hand, that's for sure, but I did work as a waitress when I was in my early 20s and always made it a point to get to know the cooks. I learned a few tricks of the trade, then I would try them out at home, like adding just a pinch of sugar along with your favorite spices to hamburger before making the patties. Go ahead, give it a try. My point is, the better I got at cooking, the more passionate I became about it. And the more passionate I became, the better I got at cooking. That's just one example. There are several ways to figure out what you are passionate about. Think about what you loved to do as a child. This is probably the simplest way to unearth hidden passions. Before the grown-ups get to us with their ideas, most of us know exactly who we are and what we love to do. Take a minute and think back to what you loved to do as a kid. Did you collect stamps or coins or baseball cards? Did you spend hours upon hours reading your favorite books or playing your favorite sports? Did you bring home every stray animal in the neighborhood? Were you a great babysitter? Don't laugh, but remembering what made you happy, proud, or fulfilled as a kid just might hold the key to discovering your passions as an adult. Notice when you lose track of time, dancing, singing, writing, painting, woodworking, building things, working on cars. Whatever it is that captures your full attention is probably something you're pretty passionate about. Notice what makes you excited or even what makes you angry. Sometimes our passions are born out of the things we want to change. If you have a strong emotion about a specific cause or feel a desire to jump in and help certain organizations, solve a particular social issue, or work to change the world for the better, pay close attention to those feelings, then give yourself permission to act on them. Take note of what you're good at. Maybe you love being the go-to problem solver at work. Everyone comes to you because they know you'll figure out the answer or come up with a brilliant solution. Or you're really good with computers and love designing new software. Don't just dismiss your talents. Build upon them, develop them, and see where they take you. You just might uncover another hidden passion. Tony Robbins, the world-renowned motivational speaker, has a pretty good list of 10 ways to find your passion on his website. There's a link on the podcast website if you want to check it out. In addition to some of the suggestions I've shared with you, number 6 on his list is my personal favorite, the rocking chair test. Apparently, he uses this one a lot. Imagine yourself when you're 90 years old, sitting on your porch in your rocking chair and reminiscing about your life. What is your biggest regret? What do you wish you had experienced? What passion do you wish you had followed? How do you want to be remembered? All of these questions will unlock something inside you and give you hints of what really matters to you. I love the visualization of this exercise. It really makes you take a long, hard look at what matters most in your life. And that, my friends, is exactly where our passions spring from. Now that we have a handle on ways to identify our passions, how do we live them? We all know life becomes demanding, and it's pretty easy to set aside our own needs. But part of giving ourselves the gift of passion is making room in our lives and dedicating time to the things we are passionate about. I came across a Huffington Post article by Mo Situbtim, founder and CEO of the Happiness Planner, titled 7 Rules to Live By for Those Who Live with Passion. Here are a few ways Mo suggests we can live our lives with more passion. 1. Get obsessed with your passion. Once you've discovered your passion, you give it all you've got and get to know it inside out. Let your passion become a huge part of who you are. Live it and breathe it. Begin to see the world through your passions. 2. Be open-minded and curious. Live life with your arms wide open and be open to opportunities, especially in your field of passion. Try to listen and understand rather than judge. By being open-minded, you get to learn more and experience more. Let your inspiration fuel your curiosity and your creativity drive your desires to learn. 3. Be inspiring. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Pablo Picasso. Passion is contagious, and the only way to be truly fulfilled is to inspire others. As your passion gives your life purpose and meaning, it would be a shame to keep what you know and what you've experienced to yourself. Telling your life story or showcasing your creativity to the world is a way to pass on your passion. As someone who lives with passion and finds happiness and life's joy through it, you want to inspire others to feel the same way. And this, sisters, is exactly why I created the Aquitaine Project. And my personal favorite, number 4, love fully and deeply. Your passion in life goes beyond just your enthusiasm for your topic of interest. Your passions penetrate all parts of your life, including love. You love fully and deeply with a passion. You don't let it go dry or stale. You always find ways to spice up your love life. Sometimes you feel vulnerable because of this, but it's the only way to truly feel the emotional side of ourselves. That's some pretty good advice, Mo. Thanks. Like Abigail, my love for my husband is a central part of my life. Okay, here's where I get a bit mushy, you guys. Keeping our passion alive after almost 38 years of marriage comes down to making time to stay connected. We don't just have date nights, we have love adventures, enjoying each other's company. We love hanging out with each other, appreciating each other's gifts and talents. He loves my cooking, and I love the way he can turn a piece of wood into a masterpiece, and respecting each other's opinions, especially when we disagree. I love that after all these years, we are truly each other's best friend. As for my other passions, they're pretty much a regular thing in my life. For example, I spend time every day thinking about, talking about, planning, and visualizing about the Aquitaine project. It really has become a big part of my life. The Aquitaine project actually fuels my passion for wanting people to be happy. So it's two passions in one. And not a day goes by that I'm not cooking, baking, looking up recipes, or planning our next family dinner. Like I said, I love to cook. When we commit to discovering, pursuing, and making time for our passions, they can't help but become part of who we are. And that, sisters, is the magic of living a passionate life. As the saying goes, behind every great man, there's a great woman. I believe John Adams thanked his lucky stars every day for the great woman in his life. In history, many first ladies are often overshadowed by their husbands. That certainly wasn't the case with Abigail Adams. She was the first lady to act as a political advisor to her husband, and the first to be dubbed Mrs. President. Abigail was politically engaged to a degree that was highly unusual among women of the 18th and 19th century. In addition to being the wife of one president and the mother of another, she left her own lasting legacy. Abigail lived, as we like to say today, out loud, unafraid to speak her mind and share her thoughts and opinions on, well, everything. Hailed for her now famous 1776 letter that reminds the Founding Fathers to remember the ladies in their new laws, she was a living, breathing symbol of the American Revolution. Her unapologetically opinionated and passionate views on politics, war, society, marriage, women's rights, the abolition of slavery, her family, and the deep love she felt for her husband, all recorded in her letters, provide us a unique window into her life and the times she lived in. Now, more than 200 years later, the passionate way in which she lived her life and her devotion to the people and causes she held dear make her an invaluable addition to the tapestry of women's history. So, in honor of this revolutionary Brightlighter, whose passions helped forge a nation, let's light the fires of our own passions and live and love the way Abigail did, out loud. Why I love this woman. Those who live passionately teach us how to love. Those who love passionately teach us how to live. Sarah Banbronick. A sentiment I wholeheartedly share and try to live up to every day. But what in the world can an American colonial era, slightly puritanical minister's daughter teach me about living a life of passion? Apparently quite a lot. Abigail was opinionated, smart, and witty. A force to be reckoned with, I'm sure John and others of her time would agree. She spoke her mind on topics which, according to society, women had no business worrying their pretty little heads about. Well, she took great offense to such notions. Her writing reveals her revolutionary spirit and a dedication to American independence as strong as the Founding Fathers, as well as her commitment to rights for women and the end of slavery. And as I really got to know more about Abigail Adams, who she was, what she stood for, her 54-year-long love affair with John, and her uncompromising devotion to her family, I recognized several similarities to my own life. She was a woman who loved with her whole heart and poured all of herself, her thoughts and desires, her joys and sorrows, her fears and aspirations into hundreds of letters written to her one true love when they were apart. It's not surprising to me at all that she was a Scorpio. Like Abigail, I cherish knowledge. In one of my favorite Abigail quotes, she says, "Well, knowledge is a fine thing, and Mother Eve thought so, but she smarted so severely for hers that most of her daughters have been afraid of it since." Not this daughter, Abigail. My love for learning and knowledge and sharing the wisdom of women from all around the world led me to the Aquitaine Project. I, too, am fiercely devoted to my family and tribe, and like Abigail, my husband is my best friend and the love of my life. Our own love affair has been going on for 47 years, but in our case, he's the Scorpio. I am a lucky woman. For me, Abigail Adams is the bright lighter who inspires me to engage in the world around me, fully embrace my passions, and follow wherever they lead. To learn more about the life and times of Abigail Adams, click on her portrait on the Aquitaine Project website at www.theaquitaineproject.com. There you'll find links to resources about Abigail and the hundreds of letters she wrote to John Adams. You'll also find links to help you create and live your own passionate life story. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All right, until next time, my Brightlighters. Light up your life with love and passion so your sisters can find you.